The man was shaped by his environment. It wasn't his fault. He was just made that way. He was known as a liar, a schemer, a swindler, a cheat. Right from the very beginning, a guy named Jacob or Yaakov came out pulling on his brother's heel, trying to get ahead. Eventually, with his mother's help, and maybe that's where he learned some of his manipulation and narcissistic ways. He tricked his brother Esau into selling his birthright for the price of a bowl of stew. And again, later with his mother's help, tricked his own father to give him that blessing. His father thinking he was actually the elder brother. Now, what was said was said. What was done was done. The blessing had been given. Couldn't get it back. Esau was angry. Jacob was happy, and he was afraid of Esau. So he ran. And well, one night it happened. It was maybe one of those starry nights that are just, every star in this galaxy can be seen and sleep comes easy. But then something happened and Jacob had a dream, or it was a encounter, or it was a dream encounter. God came and invaded his space. And as it's recorded, a man came and wrestled with Jacob all night long. It was hot and heavy. It was pressure against pressure, strength on strength. They fought all night. In Genesis 32, it says, "And a man wrestled with him until the breaking of the day. And when the man saw that he did not prevail against Jacob, he touched his hip socket. And Jacob's hip was put out of joint as he wrestled with him. And then he said, 'Let me go, for the day has broken.' But Jacob said, 'I will not let you go unless you bless me.' And he said to him, 'What is your name?' And he said, 'Jacob.' And then he said, 'Your name shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with God and with men and have prevailed.' And then Jacob asked him, 'Please tell me your name.' But he said, 'Why is it that you ask my name?' And there he blessed him. And so Jacob called the name of that place Peniel, saying, 'For I have seen God face to face, and yet my life has been delivered.' The sun rose upon him as he passed Peniel, limping because of his hip. And therefore to this day the people of Israel do not eat the sinew of the thigh that is in the hip socket, because he touched the socket of Jacob's hip, and the sinew of the thigh." Did you catch it? Did you catch the question? What is your name? Now, why would God ask Jacob his name? Didn't he know? And well, in those days, often the man's character was tied up in his name. And Jacob, in fact, meant heel grabber, always trying to get ahead, a bit of a con man. It was a nickname for a schemer. But why would God pull that out of Jacob? Up and out. He had to confess who he was before God. He had to say, "My name is Jacob. I am a trickster. I'm a schemer. I'm always trying to get ahead." And he had to confess that, as often people do. I'm an outcast. I'm a poser. I'm an imposter. In order to receive from God the cleansing and the power to become really who you truly are and what God declares you to be. So what does God do? Well, first he pokes his hip socket and renders that useless. And for the rest of his life, Jacob had this limp. And so every step he took was a step of grace, because he'd take a step and he'd realize, I am not God. I am not God. But he wouldn't say, I am Jacob, because the second thing God did was he changed his name. He changed his name to Israel. So from schemer, heel grabber, to Israel, which means you've striven with God, you've overcome. Overcomer is what it means. How many of us have had our names changed like that, our identities wrapped up in our who we were, and then God in a second changes our identity because now we're called by a different name. We're called Christian or Christ one. In a second, God changes everything. Have you had your name changed? Have you had your identity wrapped up in Him, in Christ? Is it wrapped up in who you were? Or are you in Christ? Are you now a Christ one? Because when you come to Christ, all things become new. Old things are passed away. And you have a new identity in Jesus, in Christ. And now He says, now go and live out who you are. Live out who I've declared you to be. It was actually God's declaration. Jacob didn't do anything to get his name changed, except have his hip broken. We don't do anything to get our name and our identity changed. It's all in Jesus. He declares it over us. He declares us holy and acceptable to Him because of what He's done, not because of us. It's an amazing exchange of grace. Our sin for His grace. Wow. Let's go live out who we're supposed to be.